So I just wanted to welcome all of you, and we may get some answers to how our youth has been faring during this pandemic, and many of us have grandchildren and relatives who have been very much younger relatives who have been very much affected by this period. So it's going to be interesting to hear what they have to tell us. And another instruction, please record your questions on chat. And the questions will be answered at the end of the program. Rocky does not need any introduction, obviously, but he has worked. I'm very excited to hear how he has been working with youth at the church, something that has been invaluable for them to have that resource during this very difficult time. So, welcome, Rocky.
Thank you. It's really good to be here. It's good to see all of you. Hello, hello. And I will briefly introduce Natalie. Hello, Natalie. Natalie is one of our high school seniors at the church. We have 3 youth who you're going to hear from tonight. Natalie is the only one who is in person. The other 2 had schedule issues where I recorded a conversation with them earlier in the week, and I'm going to show you video snippets of those conversations. Okay, so if you have a question that you want a real live teenager to answer, Natalie understands that she has to be the only one, and she's game for that. So let me open our time with a word of prayer, and then I will say some introductory things. So let's pray. God, we are grateful for the gift of community at Fourth Presbyterian Church, a community that enfolds all of us across our many ages and life experiences. We are grateful for the young people in our midst and what they have to teach us, and we are grateful that we get to be in relationship with them. We pray that in our conversation tonight, you would be opening our eyes to the ways that you are at work in their lives and in our lives collectively. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. So this is the second consecutive year, I believe, in which you all have invited youth from our congregation to come and talk to you about their life. And specifically this year, the invitation asked to talk about how students have dealt with COVID. And so that's mostly what we're going to talk about. But of course, if you have questions that you want to ask of Natalie about other things, I'm sure she'll be willing to answer them. I just want to say a couple things about what youth ministry at Fourth has done to sort of adapt to COVID since March of 2018. And this is a good interruption. My own teenage daughter is sending me screen time requests as I begin here. So pretty quickly in March of 2020, when everything had to shut down, we got on Zoom for our youth groups, like the same week. We had been meeting on Sunday mornings during the worship service times for junior high, senior high confirmation. And we went to like a Monday night, or it was like a Tuesday night and a Wednesday night on Zoom. And very quickly, lots of students were participating in that. Over the spring, it sort of dwindled. We did some things over the summer on a weekly basis that we'd never done before. And then in September of 2020, so a year ago, we launched on what we knew was going to be an entire year of youth ministry programming on Zoom. We did what all the ministries of the church had to do in that regard. And it worked better than any of us expected for what it is good for. And when we got to the end of the year and we're feeling really good about how great it was all going, like around May, we said, let's keep doing this into the summer. And things opened up in May and everybody disappeared. So we we made some plans to start this year back in person, but also with some Zoom youth group things, because we were really high on how it went. And we have had zero participation in Zoom from youth this fall, which is not something we're upset about. We're curious about it. And I think what you'll hear in some of the conversation is how teenagers experienced all of this online stuff and where they wanted to draw a line, I think, between having to be online for school and how they socialized outside of that. So we are back in person on Sunday mornings now. We have been now for about 3 weeks, junior high, confirmation, senior high, and that's what we're doing. So if you have questions about how that's going, I'm happy to answer those later. But why don't we jump right into the conversation with our students? How this is going to work is I've got a series of questions, and I will ask a question and then either play the video of Charlie and Annika and then ask Natalie, or I'll ask Natalie first and then play the video. So Natalie, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in a minute, but I'll say the other two students you're going to hear for are Charlie Calkins and Annika Strax. They're both seniors. Natalie is also a senior. And these three students are all officers. Natalie and Charlie are deacons this year, and Annika is an elder. So they were the three that I went to first with this invitation, because I wanted them to view this as a leadership opportunity. So Natalie, why don't you briefly just introduce yourself, kind of tell us like what's your life story with Fourth, where you go to school.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I'm a senior at the Latin School of Chicago, which is at North and Clark, so pretty close to Fourth Pres. My family joined Fourth Pres when I was in second grade or third grade, I think, and I've been a member ever since. I was confirmed in 8th grade at Fourth Pres. Yeah, that's kind of my story. Before COVID, I would teach Sunday school with my mom to the second graders, which was always super fun.
Yeah, Natalie, one of the things that I think is really interesting about you and your relationship to Fourth, and this is part of like the conversation we had about being a youth officer, is you don't really do the youth group stuff. Like you participate in a lot of stuff at Fourth, but in a way that is not part of the structured youth ministry activities, which I think is great and fine. So you've done Sunday school, right? Mm-hmm. And what other kinds of things have you done at Fourth?
Mostly Sunday school, I think. I was also confirmed at Fourth. I feel like those were my two big involved pieces. And then I often go with my family on Sundays.
Terrific. Well, I'm just going to jump right in and ask you the first question then, okay? So I would be really curious to hear you talk about what was the immediate impact of COVID when everything shut down? Like describe for us how that affected school, your other activities, your friends. Like how did that go right away? So
right away, it was just chaos. Like no one knew how to use online school. It was a lot. So my classes all moved online very quickly. And so we started meeting on Zoom, and then students were super Zoom fatigued, meeting on Zoom for 8 hours. So they tried to space it out and give us some like in-person Zoom classes and some just asynchronous assignments we could do on paper at home alone. So that is kind of how school moved. In terms of extracurriculars, I unfortunately was stage managing a play. So I was running the tech crew, and we had to move to a Zoom play, which is one of the strangest activities I've done, but was a totally new experience. I have all sorts of Zoom skills now, and I can play sound effects over Zoom, but I would prefer to never use them again. So we may need you to train us on some of those skills. What is it, like, how do you do a play over Zoom? Well, there's like a Zoom webinar. So it just shows you like the cast faces and everybody else is just cameras off. And you just have them turn their camera on and read their lines. And they had like costumes on from like t-shirt and up. So I got these funny photos of actors who had on like their, traditional costume and then pajama pants or slippers. So it was actually fun, but it was just a very different experience. So I actually ended up doing 2 of those plays during COVID. I wonder, is that something that you think you would ever do just for its own sake when you don't have to? Never on Zoom again. I miss the community that comes with it. And I felt like that was really what got lost on Zoom. It's also hard to look at a screen for that long, I think.
Sure. So then last year, starting in the fall, all the way through the spring, were you online? Were you in person?
So first semester I was online, and then starting second semester, I was in person in the mornings and then online in the afternoons. And this was so the seniors and juniors at my school were afternoons or were mornings, and then freshmen and sophomores were afternoons. So that way they could have some people in the building. I like to say I went to preschool all year. That's during that time because I would get up, go to 2 classes, come home, take a nap, and then go to my afternoon classes online. So that was a different model. And then kind of May, for the last month of school, we were in person all day, which was really great.
So starting in May, every day, 5 days a week, all day.
Yep.
So no more apple juice and goldfish crackers in the middle of the day.
No more naps. And that was very quickly a problem for me. So
Okay. All right. Well, I am going to set up the screen share here to show you all the video. And of course, I tested this with Bob and Gun before, and now it has closed on me. So let me bring this up again. The first person you're going to hear from is Annika. If the volume is too loud, you can turn it down. I've got it up as high as it will go.
Since I'd had all these extracurricular activities, and so I was doing a lot at school, and then suddenly that just all wasn't there. And so the first month or so of online learning was a lot about figuring out how online learning worked and how you could take a test online. So I don't know that there was a lot of actual schooling going on at that time, and yeah, it was okay. It wasn't ever great, but at that point, at least, I was, especially since the pandemic had just started, it was okay, I don't really want to be in school right now anyway. And I think the biggest thing was that I'd been preparing all year to direct a 1-act play at the end of the year, and school shut down the day before auditions, and that wound up getting pushed back to the next fall and happening online. Same time, most of my activities were through school, so the big one was piano, which kept going, but again, it took a while just to figure out how to do lessons on FaceTime, because there are a lot of limits to that. And so that, I think technically it shut down maybe a week after school, but my teacher asked me to do the last week that would have been in person online so she could figure out how to make it work best.
Yeah, so I'm someone who, before the pandemic and even now, kind of after it, am really, really busy. I do a ton of extracurricular activities, and then do a lot of stuff with school as well. So it was kind of a complete 180 going from leaving the house at 6:30 to get to school and coming home at 8 p.m. So going from that to just being stuck at home every single day without school to go to, without my choir to go to, without baseball practice, without church to go to on Sundays. It was really just, it took a lot of getting used to, because I just had never had that much time where I wasn't doing something and didn't have a structure and a place to go. So it really kind of revolutionized the way I dealt with time, because I was always looking for more time to do more things. And now I had so much time and nothing to do. At the beginning, I was really kind of struggling to manage my time. I watched a lot of TV, I watched a lot of YouTube, I listened to a lot of music, and really didn't do anything productive for a good 2 weeks or a month, because I was always like, oh, we're gonna go back, and I gotta enjoy my free time before I'm thrown back into school and have all those things to worry about. So at the beginning, it was really unproductive. But after I kind of wrapped my head around being at home, I found new ways to use my time. I started focusing a lot on like doing things for myself. Like I began running a lot. I said listening to music before as something I would waste time on, but really getting into a lot of kind of discrete artists. And I think I watched the Hamilton musical 7 times when it came out. But just finding small things that would bring me joy, like lying on the couch and petting my dog, that I didn't have the opportunity to do all the time, but that made me feel productive nonetheless. I remember the kind of early winter of 2020, so February and March. I heard all these things about the pandemic. Was never really afraid. I think as most of us were, never thought much of it. And even when it first started, my mom's a doctor. She was super worried. Had us wash our groceries after we brought them home for a while. But I still never really was worried about it until a little bit into the pandemic, when tons of people started getting it and dying. Then over the summer of 2020, everything loosened up a little bit, which was good. But then last winter, when it got heavy again, I was a little worried. I think as a young person, I've never had the same fear that older people have had, just because all the studies showed that young people were more likely to survive. But I was worried about getting it for the sake of the people around me, like my grandmother, my aunt who has medical problems. So I was never really worried for my health, but I was for the people around me, which led me to be pretty as cautious as I could be.
Were any of those fears realized, or has everybody been okay?
Everybody has been okay. Another scary moment was when my older sister got COVID. And that was really the closest it kind of came to my family. She was away at college, but kind of hearing her experience with it, and not only the physical side effects, but also the mental side effects of having the disease that's kind of plaguing all of us in some way, did bring a little bit of did add another kind of level to it. But I've been very lucky so far that not a lot of my friends and relatives have been medically affected by it.
I was more scared of COVID earlier. Now that I'm vaccinated and my family's vaccinated, I'm not as worried about it, which has been really helpful. I think the way I wound up coping with being scared was just being as careful as possible and doing almost everything outdoors and wearing a mask when I was around other people. I think just knowing that I was being as careful as possible helped me cope with being scared of that.
So I'll turn to you, Natalie, now with that question about fear. What role has fear played in your life throughout all of this?
So when COVID started out, when it wasn't in the United States yet, I was like keeping track of it and wondering about it. But I wasn't totally afraid. And my friend was actually, one of my cousins was studying abroad in China, and he got sent back to the United States, like one of the last planes out, had to quarantine for 2 weeks, did not have COVID. But when he came home, it became really real and scary that this was something that was going to end up in the United States and we needed to be really careful of. So I definitely think that's when I started to fear a little bit more. I kind of combated that. I was super cautious. Like Charlie was saying, like my mom made us wash our groceries when we came home. And kind of, I was very afraid in the beginning, and I'm super, super grateful for the vaccine every day because my family has some medical issues that make us more, or my parents more at risk. So I was very, very cautious, and I was mainly afraid for them.
So are you afraid? Do you have any fear related to COVID at all anymore?
Less. I'm still pretty cautious. And I'm still more concerned about giving it to other people versus getting it myself. But I think it's still there somewhat.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you being candid about that. So I'm going to let you answer the next question first. This is the third year of school now that where COVID is a thing, which is the bulk of your time in high school, right?
Yeah.
So this year of school, how different does it feel? Does it feel like normal, like before COVID, or does it feel like something different? How is it?
This year of school, so as precautions go, my school is almost back to normal from pre-COVID, but we all wear masks all the time. So that's kind of where we're at. It definitely feels much more normal than being in person at the end of last year. I feel like that sense of community has come back because we're allowed to all be at assemblies together now or have pep rallies in the gym. So I really miss that part of school. So that's great. I would say this is the best year of COVID school yet. Knock on wood, it's also the last year of COVID school. So yeah, that's what I think.
So it's better now.
Definitely better. So much better.
All right, good.
Rocky, I think you're muted.
I'm going to let us hear from Annika and Charlie about that now.
I think I've adjusted to it by now. So my school is back in person 5 days a week, and that's been really helpful. So this is probably actually the best time since the pandemic started because we're back in person all the time. We don't have to deal with Zoom very much. They took away some of the social distancing constraints, so it's easier to like be around my friends. And so yeah, I think at this point I'm used to it and there aren't quite as many restrictions. I think last fall was the worst time because that was when they kept saying, oh, maybe we can go back to in person a few days a week. But really, we spent almost the entire fall semester on Zoom. And there's just like a lot of waiting and uncertainty about, can we go back in person? And now that we're back in person, we need to shut back down after a few weeks. And it was like the beginning of COVID where it was on a day-by-day basis. So I think dealing with the uncertainty has probably been the worst part. My school has an 100% vaccination rate or close to 100%. And so even though the pandemic is still going on, we know that we can be in school 5 days a week. And assuming like nothing super catastrophic happens, we can stay there.
Yeah, so I was a little shocked at the beginning of September because after 18 months of being at home and being out of my schedule, all of a sudden when school came back, I was thrown right back into it. I had school, my school is now completely in person with masks on, but completely the same. I have choir rehearsals in person. I play baseball games all the time. Church is in person. Everything kind of came back really dramatically, which it can be debated that it came back even more than it was before because there's so many things to catch up in school and we haven't rehearsed as a choir in 18 months. So I think at the moment we're back, even though in a different capacity than before because we're wearing masks and still social distancing. But it definitely feels like the busyness and all the activities that were going on before the pandemic have somewhat returned.
I mean, we're still getting COVID tests every week. So I guess the biggest uncertainty is like if somebody tests positive for COVID somehow and has to quarantine, there's no Zoom school anymore. So if you have to quarantine for any reason, then you miss a lot of school. Again, with the vaccines, that feels unlikely right now.
I remember myself during the pandemic wishing nothing more than to be out of the house at 6:30 and to have somewhere to go and so many friends and faces to see. So, but also it's really taxing. I now realize being away from the house for so long and having so many things to do, and so many commitments to uphold. So I think it's definitely different, but there's pros and cons, I'd say. I've always kind of been more of a face-to-face person when it comes to socializing and having friends. I call myself situationally funny. If you ask me to tell you a joke, I wouldn't be able to, but give me a good setup for a punchline and I'm there. And that's really hard to do when you're on a group FaceTime, or like a Zoom call, which happened a lot in the beginning of the pandemic. So I was a little slow to the virtual social scene, just because I was like, oh, I don't want to do another FaceTime call, where I never feel like people are really listening to me, and there's never moments for like side conversations. So it was a tough adjustment. I did find that one-on-one calls really brought me a lot of joy, in being able to talk with someone and know that they're kind of listening to you and you're listening to them, and building off that conversation, was something I began doing a lot, just FaceTiming one of my friends out of the blue, and having a conversation with them, rather than those large 10-person FaceTime calls, which I really enjoyed and have tried to keep going now that we've been relieved a little bit of the height of the pandemic.
I think my friends and I wound up doing a lot of stuff outside, and we would still like stay socially distanced and usually wear a mask for that, but we could like take a walk or something. We'd do things like eat dinner and watch movies in people's backyards, and so just being able to see people and talk to them, like, not in school, was helpful. It used to be that we'd like go to a store or a bookstore or a restaurant or something to hang out, and now we're mostly doing it at people's houses. And like obviously not having to social distance anymore is very helpful, but I think things like staying outdoors and doing things at people's houses and maybe even wearing a mask for a while are going to stay for a while.
All right, Natalie, how have you stayed connected to your friends through all of this?
So much like Charlie, I was much more of a face-to-face person, and I have mastered the FaceTime call now, especially early on when kind of the first March through May, when I was supposed to be in school and I was online. I would text my friends, like, meet you at lunch in 5 minutes, and then make my lunch and sit and FaceTime them while we ate. So it was almost like we were having lunch together in person, because we really missed it. And then kind of that next September, so a year ago, about when things were, we could still be outside because it was nice out, we do Zoom school in my backyard, where the three of us would sit on like either ends and then super spread out, and like take our Zoom calls and then hang out in between outside. So now things I feel like have opened up a little bit more, and that's great, because I still wear masks, but I can hang out with them, and I can go to their field hockey games and do things more outdoors with them, which is great.
And are you still doing the FaceTime stuff? Like the technology that you had to use for COVID, has that kept going, or have you abandoned that?
It has, definitely less, because I see them in person now, which is great, but still somewhat, yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to move to the next question, and you get to go first on this one. There's been so much conversation about depression and anxiety and mental health, particularly for young people throughout COVID. What is your sense about how the teenagers are doing mentally and emotionally right now?
I think going back to school in person has helped teenagers so much. I think it really, kids are doing so much better now, just because we're back to being in person. Also, not just like going to school, like going to sports practices or being part of theater, or like Charlie said, his choir, like all of those things that make you happy in person, like being able to do them again, I think is really great for teenagers.
Has mental health been a thing that you and your peers have actually talked about?
It's a good question. A little bit, I think. My school talked about it. They really encouraged kids to check in with their school counselors during COVID, just because they know, especially moving to online school, it's really, really tough for kids. It was just a different type of learning, and it was just really tough. So I think my school has done a good job of bringing it up, and reminding kids that they should be checking in with themselves and their friends.
Yeah. So it doesn't sound like there's much of like a stigma about the subject for you and your peers.
I don't think so. I think the most important point our counselor made is like everyone is struggling with this right now. Like you're not alone. And I think for teenagers, knowing that is really helpful for them to kind of destigmatize it.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Okay, we're going to hear from Annika and Charlie again. Thanks, Natalie.
I know a lot of people who have been struggling mentally and emotionally with COVID. And I personally haven't really been struggling, but I know a lot of people who are struggling even though they weren't really before the pandemic. I think for a variety of reasons, including some that probably aren't as related to the pandemic. But I think the pandemic really had an effect on everybody because there wasn't as much socializing going on with other people. Everybody was more isolated. And then all this uncertainty, especially with school, which was something most people took for granted pre-pandemic. Probably just because a lot of people are struggling, more people are talking about it, which I think is good. But yeah, also just because my friends and I are seniors and we're applying to college, and that's stressful too, then we tend to talk about how stressed we are about that, and that can lead into more conversations about how we're doing in general.
I think the pandemic was hard for a lot of people because everything we knew was kind of thrown up in the air. That kind of busyness that I had, I also really enjoyed. I loved always having something to do and never being unsure of if what I was doing was good or if I was using my time productively, because I was just always busy, always doing something that I love to do. And so not having that kind of sense of purpose, not only for me, but I feel like for a lot of people, a kind of a sense of purpose and productiveness was a big part of the pandemic. And a lot of people I've talked to have, a lot of my friends have struggled mentally through the pandemic. And I feel that now that we're out of it, in some ways that has gotten better. But I think it's also raised awareness a little bit about kind of recognizing signs of depression and anxiety. For me, that's kind of played out, and when I feel like when I feel not great, I'm much more easily to say, oh, I don't like what I'm doing right now. My time would be better served maybe by myself or going on a run or watching Hamilton for the 12th time. I'm back in my Hamilton phase. I just listened to the playlist for 2 hours on my commute today. But I think being able to recognize when and being aware of mental health has definitely heightened or has definitely risen over the pandemic. I don't know if it's just because I'm 2 years older and all my friends are 2 years older and more mature now than they were before the pandemic. But I feel like I've had a lot more conversations when I ask one of my friends, oh, how are you doing? And instead of just saying fine, as they would if a parent asked them that, they actually feel comfortable saying how they're doing. So COVID has affected my college process. I think the main way it's affected it is I haven't been able to tour all the schools I wanted to. My main touring window would have been last spring and this summer, and a lot of schools weren't offering tours, so I haven't gotten to see all the schools I want to. And even the ones I have seen, I haven't been able to spend a night with a student or even go when there's a bunch of students on campus because colleges have been so in and out. So I think having a feel for what colleges are like has definitely been impacted.
Last fall was when I really started looking at colleges, and normally I think I would have gone to a lot of campuses and tried to look at it that way, but because of COVID, I was doing online visits, which are helpful in some sense, but now that I've started going to colleges and looking at the campus and doing tours in person, that's so much more helpful than the online tours have been. So that's probably the biggest thing. I think the other thing is that all of the stuff about like preparing for colleges also happened online. And so I don't know what it would look like in a normal year, but it's felt like there's been maybe less communication about it than usual. So again, there's just a lot of uncertainty about like whether we'd be able to look at campuses or whether we'd have to pick schools just based on the online stuff. And I think that's getting better now because everybody's doing tours and we're back in person and we can go talk to the representatives in person, which is great. It depends on when we went to see the campuses. The campuses we went to see in the summer had fewer limitations, but now a lot of campuses won't let you go in most of the buildings because there are students in there and they want to protect their students, obviously. And so, but even seeing the outdoors is helpful. And that looks different at every school. Different schools have different restrictions.
So Natalie, what has the college application process been like for you with all of the COVID stuff?
I was just laughing with my mom, since applying to college is already so notoriously fun, why not do it during a pandemic? So it has definitely been a stressful process. I think Charlie and Annika kind of summed it up great. Like I've seen significantly less schools than I think I would have if there was no pandemic, and which is difficult. And then the virtual stuff, I have, like Annika, I went to a lot of virtual tours and virtual information sessions, but it's really hard, I feel like, to get the feel for the school without actually going in person and talking to students there and seeing, their thoughts. So it's definitely been difficult. I will say the colleges have really stepped it up and done some really awesome online programming. So they're definitely trying to adapt, which is great. Yeah.
So you've been able to do some campus visits though?
Yes, I've been to a few really recently. Like I had only been on 2 college campuses in my life until this summer, which I feel like is a little behind for an average kind of layout of when you would see schools.
Okay. So when you look back on this whole experience in the future, who do you think the people are going to be that you identify as like the people who helped you through it?
My friends, I have 2 very close friends who I feel like the 3 of us kind of got through this together. Right at lunchtime, FaceTime calls were great, and just being there for each other. Also my mom, she's the best, and there's a lot of tears during online school that she helped out with. So I really appreciate that. My teachers were also great. They were super flexible and understood that this is a really hard time for students. So they were great about grading and understanding that you might not understand something in a Zoom lecture and they're going to have to meet with you over Zoom at a different time and take some extra time to help you walk through it.
Yeah, someone has a question in the chat about how teachers have responded to COVID, and you're saying flexibility on their part was helpful for you.
Yep, definitely. They were very sorry. My dog is very upset. They were super flexible, which was great. I think they really understood that this is not an easy thing. So they were really great.
That's great. All right, thanks, Natalie.
My family a lot, especially since at the beginning of COVID, we were just around each other all the time. So I started doing a lot more stuff with my family than I'd been doing previously, and also with my friends, because we've been talking a lot and trying to hang out a lot, and we don't have when we didn't like see each other in the hallways and get to talk to each other there, and we actually had to go and make time to see each other and go to each other's houses. And then church too, like I've been going to church and youth group through the whole pandemic. And like there was the summer discussion group the summer of 2020 that was really helpful because we were able to talk about a lot without like a certain syllabus that we were following. And then also once I started school in the fall of 2020, my teachers took a lot of time to make sure they were meeting with us regularly and see how we were doing and make sure we were understanding the material, which was helpful because it's just harder to learn over Zoom than it is in person.
I was really busy before the pandemic because I was always doing these activities. And in my activities, I had all these different friends. So I had a ton of friends, but none of them were super duper close. During the pandemic, when you couldn't see a group of 20 people, I was able to become a lot closer with a few of my friends. I had two friends, Margot and Tova, that we would meet up every week in Oz Park. And I think we met up like 30 times from June of 2020 to June of this year, just because every week we'd be meeting up and talking. And then I have another friend, Grace, who is my neighbor. She got a new puppy, and every day after virtual school, I'd go over to her house and play with her puppy. So the pandemic definitely let me get closer with people, and also allowed me to rely on some of the people I formed new close friendships with more. I think over the pandemic, in all in all, I've become much more connected to the church. My senior high youth group meetings were one of the few things that kept going. And I feel kept going in kind of the same capacity as it had before, because prior to the pandemic, we'd meet up, eat bagels for a while, and then have our discussion about a biblical passage or current events and faith. And I think all of a sudden, after once the pandemic hit, March 17th or whatever it was, we started having these virtual Zoom meetings, which were really quite similar to what we would do in person. It was online, but we'd talk about the same things. We'd kind of have the same structure. There are no bagels, much to my sadness. But it was really that kind of continuity. It was really one of the few things that stayed really similar from before and during the pandemic. So that got me a lot more invested in church, I think. I started thinking more about it. I started looking forward to being able to share with the senior high what Netflix show I'd binged that week. But it gave me something to think about, and because it was so similar to before the pandemic, once we talk about a biblical passage in one meeting, I'd spend the week thinking about that and trying to find ways to apply that to my life, because that activity stood out so much to me because it was similar to what we had done before the pandemic.
Well, I know, especially when COVID started, I wound up spending a lot more time doing stuff with church because, again, I've been really busy before, but now there was a lot of stuff like the youth groups, which have taken various different forms, and I got to go to the youth groups and the service, both, and so that was helpful. And I don't know. I don't know that COVID has really affected my faith one way or the other. I think it's stayed about consistent through the pandemic, especially since I was watching the services with my family and we would like be doing the reading and singing together. And every time there was a hymn playing, my dog would come in and start playing with his toys.
I was very honored to become a deacon this year. And the first thing you have to do when you're a deacon is get trained. That was a lot because I was with all these adults on Zoom every weekend, going over the deacon handbook and all these different activities and all these different rules. But now I've found it to be really quite rewarding. I've been able to meet up with the other youth deacon and two of our mentors on multiple occasions and have dinners outside where we can chat about kind of our faith and what's going on in our lives. And then also being able to attend kind of larger deacon meetings and talk about what the church is doing and give me kind of a wider overview of learning about not only what the church stands for, but what the actions it also takes in more detail has really helped me learn more about the church.
So Natalie, you did Sunday school and stuff as like your main church thing. What have you done church-wise through all this?
I have not been a Sunday school teacher, and it has made me so sad. I've missed the first graders and their bounds of energy and excitedness, which is so great. But so I'm hoping to go back to that soon. On the flip side, my family isn't always in town. In the summer, we're often not. And so we weren't able to attend church. And so with the live stream, we were able to go more weekends, which was great. So I think in that way, I've spent more time in going to actual services than I would in a normal summer in here.
And you also are a deacon. You did the whole nomination, training, ordination process during COVID online. What was that like?
I really enjoyed deacon training. It was, a couple hours every Sunday for a month and a half or something ish. And I really enjoyed it. I loved meeting all of new people who were also so excited to be deacons or officers. That was great. Like Charlie said, I learned so much about what the church stands for and what its rules are and how it makes decisions that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And so I definitely think that strengthened my relationship with the church, like really understanding what its mission is and how it helps people. So I really enjoyed deacon training, but like Charlie said, it was like me, Charlie, and a lot of adults. So it was a different experience.
And now you're going to hear my dog. Well, if you guys don't know, the deacons do a really terrific job of welcoming the youth deacons. So, all right, I'm going to play the video of this one first so that you get the last word. This is our last question.
I think it's important to find the silver linings in any situation you're in, because not all situations, but a lot of situations I've found it's about my mindset. And that's also something that the pandemic has shown me. If I go into something with a positive mindset, the outcome is much more likely to be positive. So I'd say focus on your mindset. If you're not doing something you want to be doing, change that, and just try and find the silver linings in anything you do.
I think a big thing is making sure that you're talking to somebody and that you're not being isolated. And even if that's like hanging out outdoors, then talking to somebody is so much better than being isolated. And even talking in person is a lot better than FaceTiming or Zooming with somebody.
All right, Natalie, advice if people are still struggling with this, what do you tell them?
Well, Annika and Charlie kind of hit the nail on the head. I think, at least for me, a lot of it was, where are the silver linings? What are the good outcomes of this? For an example, we got a dog, so that was really exciting. Got a puppy, and also just leaning on people and knowing it's okay to lean on people. And At least one more thing for me is that I started to write down things I was grateful for every day, because I got stuck in this mindset of being angry at the world. And I don't know, returning to that gratefulness, I think, was really great for me, especially school. I realized how grateful I am for school every day.
So you're doing like a gratitude journal.
Yeah.
Is that something that you think you'll keep doing?
If I can remember, yes.
That's great.
School is taking over, so.
I appreciate that advice. You've inspired me to give that more serious thought myself. So, okay. So friends, that is the conversation that we had teed up. There's a lot of questions in the chat. Nanette, I don't know if you want to pick a couple or to ask. Some of them were already addressed.
Yeah, a lot of them were addressed, actually, talking about anxiety and depression. People have been curious about what you've encountered in school in terms of COVID. Like, have you had a lot of COVID cases in your school? Have any of your classmates died from COVID? Have you lost anybody?
And we have not lost any students, which I'm very, very grateful for. In terms of COVID cases, this year, knock on wood, we are almost 95% vaccinated, and we have not had any outbreaks in my high school. So knock on wood there, but that's been great. Last year, we definitely had students who would have to quarantine. The biggest one was the so bad breakthrough infection. The kid was fully vaccinated and he got COVID, and so they had to quarantine the entire lacrosse team. Was our biggest case, but not too bad. It was pretty, yeah, we didn't have a ton of infections, which was great.
That is great.
Annika said that her school hasn't had any cases at all, actually. She goes to a smaller private school up in Evanston, but still, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
That is great. You mentioned lacrosse. People were asking, how do you play sports during COVID? How's it different?
Yeah, that was a fun thing to figure out. So I'm on the basketball team. And so kind of November of last year, when we were supposed to start, we had non-contact, you cannot share basketball practices. So masks and dribbling drills were mainly what you would do. So you're trying to hit somebody else's basketball back to them with your basketball so you don't touch it. It was a little bit of a mess, but we played a little bit of a season, but not much. All sports that are indoors are still masked at my school, and now the outdoor sports can play without them. But that's kind of it. It was a very weird thing to figure out last year, especially.
I also see this question from Roger about maintaining structure in your day during COVID. You talked about that a little bit. What I'm curious about related to that is, like, has this all the structure of just like a normal school schedule? It kind of sounds like that is completely back.
Yeah, it definitely is. Those 8 a.m. mornings are a little bit tough now, but it is totally back, and I'm grateful for it. I'm so much more productive when I actually have things to do, I think. So it's been great, but it's basically back.
So there's nothing of like the COVID routine of the structure of your day that you still want to keep.
Nope, I'll take those 8 a.m.s if it means I get to be in person. So.
All right.
That's awesome. Well, this might be a good wrap-up question. Somebody asked, knowing what you know now and looking back, would you have any recommendations that you think would have made it easier to get through that difficult time?
That is a great question. I definitely have to think about that. I think if I could go back in time and talk to myself, I would definitely tell myself to keep busy and try to kind of maintain a structure. Yeah, I'm not totally sure.
Well, you're getting a compliment in the chat box too. People are commenting on your amazing insight and maturity.
Well, thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. I think that's all of our questions. So Natalie, we can't thank you enough for being here. Yeah. Hand claps, everybody.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to come and talk to you all.
Really great to have you. So Gun, back over to you.
Insightful.
Start over again. I just unmuted you.
Okay. I want to thank particularly the participant for giving us a picture and an understanding of what they have been through the year and a half, and the tribulations, and what they have also gained in wisdom, not at least about maintaining structure and how to change their friendships and make an accommodation, sort of realistic optimism, as they call it, in the resilience world. And also I want to thank all of the people who came to participate, and hopefully we all are walking away with more information about how to appreciate the younger members of our friends and families, and let them know how what courage they had to get through this period, and that they did not succumb to the difficulty and they give up on themselves. And then I want to move on to our next program is in November, and Penny is going to tell us about a lighter subject than this. It has not been all bad this year. So can you unmute Penny?
She's unmuted.
Okay. Hi, I'm Penny, and the person who's going to speak at our next Cornerstones meeting, which will be Friday, November 5th, I have known almost 25 years. We are both docents at the Chicago History Museum, and Greg Borzo is our speaker's name. He's a freelance writer, but he's been with the University of Chicago. He's been with the Field Museum for years. And he is always on his bicycle. I see him around town all the time. But anyway, his latest book, he's written probably about 15 or 20 books. His latest book that I think he will focus on in a PowerPoint presentation is Lost Restaurants of Chicago. And I thought I knew about or had heard about most of the restaurants in Chicago, but I really learned quite a bit from this book. I highly recommend it. And I think you'll enjoy meeting Greg, and he's eager to come speak with us. Excellent.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's very helpful. And then I want to thank Rocky for a masterful presentation and helping us understanding the youth.
Well,
And
I appreciate your interest in the young people in our congregation and your desire to listen to their experience and to solicit their experience. It says a lot of great things about the kind of church we are. So thank you.
you're welcome. And then Rocky is going to end our meeting with a prayer.
Yes, let us pray. Go with us, oh God, out into this night, into this weekend and the time of worship together on Sunday, and into the week and weeks and months ahead, confident in your presence with us, confident in your guidance for us, confident in your purpose for us. Make us hopeful, make us resilient, and help us to love, we pray in Christ's name. Amen. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for all for coming.
All right. Good night, everyone.